Hot Topics team. This is our last Hot Topics luncheon for the season. After today, the League will be concentrating most of our resources and all of our full attention on the vital upcoming elections, the school board and primary elections in August and the midterm elections in November. Open primaries, one person, one vote, our topic today, might be considered the modern iteration of the women's suffrage fight for women's rights to vote. The League of Women Voters recognizes that voting should not unnecessarily impede any American from having a vote in our elections. Our careful analysis has shown that one impediment for a huge number of people is closed primaries. Today, our speaker, Villia Johnson, will take us through the nuts and bolts of the primary election process and cover how it affects many voters. Villia is a Sarasota resident and community activist. She grew up in Tampa and holds BA degrees in speech communications and political science from the University of South Florida. She has extensive experience in both corporate leadership and entrepreneurship. She has also held board positions with several industry associations, and she served on the board of the regional YWCA in Seattle. Villia joined the League of Women Voters of Sarasota County in 2019, and she currently serves as co-president. She is working, of course, to empower voters and strengthen civic engagement. In addition, she serves on the board of the Digital Democracy Project, a nonpartisan organization equipping voters with the tools to monitor and influence the legislative process. We have a very special guest speaker today who will provide color commentary. The Honorable Mike Bennett served in the Florida House of Representatives from 2001 to 2002 and in the Florida Senate from 2002 to 2012. He represented the 21st District, which included Manatee County and North Sarasota County. He most recently served as the Manatee County Supervisor of Elections from 2012 to 2024. As supervisor, he earned a reputation for administering elections that were widely regarded as free and fair. We welcome his insights and comments. And we're looking forward to hearing from you all in our Q&A after the presentation. Villia?
Here. Come up and join me. Thank you, Marie. Let's see if you want to have a seat. And here's a microphone. I don't know, will you all be, well, that's recording and this is for this audience. But will you all be able to hear us if we don't use microphones, do you think?
No.
Everybody got
good?
a problem with that?
Okay, so
Nope,
maybe
good.
we'll try. Is that okay, Mary Pat? Okay, let's try that. Well, welcome. First, I just want to say how delighted I am that Senator Bennett is here today because he has such a unique perspective, having run for office and being elected to office, and then also being supervisor of elections. So he's got a 360-degree perspective that we're going to really enjoy. Plus, he's just so enjoyable to speak to. So as Marie said, I'm Villia Johnson, co-president of the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan public policy organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. The League is nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose political parties or candidates. The League has been advocating for voting rights and access for over 100 years. So we're nonpartisan, but we are political. If you're here today to hear about open primaries, then I'm going to assume you're an election nerd like me. And that's good because we're going to really get into the weeds on one of the biggest challenges to voter participation today in our country. We're going to identify who is affected and why it matters, and talk about if there's something that we can do about that. I'm going to ask a couple of questions first. Does anyone in the room think our current electoral system is broken? Okay. Well, despite what most people think, the system is not broken. It does exactly what it's increasingly designed to do, and that's to enhance the powers of the parties over citizens, to increase their power, and to reduce competition. So what's happening instead is gridlock. Nothing's getting done, and there is a growing disconnect between voters and their government. Okay, next. I would also say the system is not currently serving the interest of citizens or the common good. But there is an appetite for reform, and that's being driven by several factors. One is the increase or the rise of independent voters. You know what? I just totally forgot about my slides, didn't I? Sorry about that.
Pay attention to her slide program. I've reviewed it. It's excellent.
Okay, wait a minute. Mary Pat. Technically challenged.
Join the crowd.
I just launched. I didn't even think about this. No, that's okay. As you all know, Mary Pat is the one who makes the wheels go round. There we go. Okay, that's when I talked about the league. Whoops. That's what the agenda is that we already talked about. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the factors driving change right now, the rise of independent voters, the frustration of those voters at being locked out of the system, and a complete lack of competition in our elections. So next question. We want to talk about what does one person, one vote mean in practice today? So how many of you believe that all eligible voters should have the freedom to vote for any candidate, regardless of party, in every taxpayer-funded election? Okay, good answer. And do we believe that a candidate must earn a majority of the vote in order to win an election? Okay, I'm preaching to the choir. So a 2023 survey by Unite America found overwhelming support for these principles across Republicans, Democrats, and independents. So if we all agree on these core values, this must be true for voting in America, right? No, okay, maybe not. In fact, these principles are only implemented in 3 states. In general elections, all voters can participate, voting for any candidate regardless of party. But in primary elections, millions of people have been and will be systematically excluded, including in the 2026 midterms. This includes me as an NPA, and it may well include you. 45% of Americans are now independents. It's the fastest growing segment and almost equates the 2 parties combined as far as numbers. In many states, including Florida, they're not allowed to vote in primary elections simply because they're not affiliated with a major political party or they're registered with a minor party. So I want to be clear, this is not an attack on Democrats or Republicans. This is not a partisan issue. This is a systems issue. I think I skipped a page here. So who are these people? Independents come from all backgrounds and span the full political spectrum, but there are a particularly high percentage of younger voters, veterans, and Hispanic Americans. Most identify as moderates. They often agree with both parties on different issues and prefer to evaluate based on skills and qualifications rather than partisan labels. Nearly 70% of independents believe both parties have become too extreme. So I wanted to, let's see, we decided we're going to go without mics, right? So I wanted
I'm
to
going to do what you
ask,
tell me.
he said he's had years of training at doing what women tell him, but I wanted to ask you, Mike, if you saw a rise in independent voters as supervisor of elections, or did you, I know that Manatee and Sarasota tend to be conservative. Did you see any change over the years?
There's a huge rise, okay? The problem with it is because of the not being able to participate in the primaries, a lot of people can sign up for one party so they can vote in the primary. Even though that's not how they believe, that's not who they want to vote for. They do it so they can participate. And then you have a huge number of independents, come election time, will go down and change to the party so they can vote in that particular primary and then change back afterwards. And so, yes, you see it, and it's the independent. The biggest problem with independents is they're independent.
In the nicest way possible. So I actually tracked that in Sarasota County in the last election cycle because I'd been told, oh no, they never changed. I was like, I don't think
no,
so.
they changed a lot.
So I tracked, like 2 months before the election, I wrote down the data on who was in what party, and then 2 months after, and there was a definite shift in Sarasota County. I didn't do Manatee, but okay. Oh, I'm off already. Look at that. Okay, there we are. That's independent voters. Am I on 8? Yeah, there we go. Okay. In 2024, an estimated 27 million independent and third-party voters were unable to participate in partisan primaries. In Florida alone, that was 3.8 million voters, 27% of the total. The nature of our voting public is changing fundamentally and rapidly, and yet our electoral system is stuck in 1907 when Florida enacted closed primaries. So why do primaries matter so much? As you know, primary elections elect which candidates will advance to the general election in November. State and local governments run those elections on behalf of the parties, and every state sets their own rules and has their own schedules. So as you know, Florida has their primaries in August. But all of the states run primaries differently. And the other thing that I find so interesting is that they even within the state run different offices in different ways. So they don't even run the races all the same way. There are 4 types of primaries, and I'm speaking mainly about federal congressional races for this conversation. So 3 states have completely open all-candidate primaries: Alaska, California, and Washington. All voters can vote regardless of party affiliation. 20 states have semi-open primaries. All voters choose which primary to vote in. So in other words, you come to the polls and you have to choose a Republican or a Democratic ballot to vote. So that takes a lot of thinking going in. What race is most important to me and where am I going to put my vote? And then 11 states have semi-closed primaries, meaning if you're with a party, you have to vote in that party primary. If you're an independent, you choose a Republican or a Democratic ballot still, okay? So typically you cannot vote cross-party. So I can't vote for a Republican in one and a Democrat in another. It's very confusing, I think, and it's very restrictive. So it's a lot to navigate, right? Finally, there are 16 states, including Florida, that have completely closed primaries. And that means that only voters who are registered with a party can vote. Independents are not allowed to vote. But wait, there's more. How else can we be prevented from voting? Florida primaries have been closed since 1907, but in 1998, Floridians voted by 64% to amend the Constitution to allow what's called a universal primary contest. When all the candidates in the primaries are from one party and there's no opposing candidate in the general election, then that means it should be an open contest and everybody should be able to vote. It's the final election for that seat, right? But in 2000, the Secretary of State negated the law passed by voters by ruling that if there's a write-in candidate, independents and members of the opposing party cannot vote in that election. This became known as the write-in candidate loophole, and now political operatives from both parties use that loophole to lock out voters. After the qualifying period ends, then a friend of the party registers to be a write-in candidate. They do not pay a filing fee. They typically do not have staff or an office or even a website. They do not campaign. They are there to shut out the other voters. Certainly, there are some genuine write-in candidates, but typically the rule is used as a tactic by both political parties to turn a public election into a partisan gatekeeping exercise. This disenfranchises millions and incentivizes extreme candidates. So, Mike, I know you have some experience as a write-in candidate.
I do.
Tell us your story.
You know, it's kind of interesting. Up until I came along, nobody had ever run as a write-in, okay? I was arguing with the legislature at the time that it was possible and that it was rigged. And of course, I didn't make any friends in either party, but that's beside the point. I never cared about parties. But anyhow, so they said it couldn't be done. So on the last day of qualifying for the election, I had already filled out all my paperwork. This was going to be my third term running for elections supervisor in Manatee County. So of course I'm in the office and I had all the paperwork and the check made out to qualify for running as a Republican. I also had in my hand the paperwork for filing as a write-in, which required no checks, no nothing, just file it. And the shut-off on the primary is qualifying was at 11:59, actually high noon. And so as I was standing there beside my secretary, who's taking the paperwork, at 11:59 and a half, I picked up my check, dropped the write-in paper down, and of course won as a write-in. It never happened before in the state of Florida. And I wanted to do that to prove a point that it was a screwed up system, and that if you knew how you could juggle it, you could prove it and do it. And I did it, okay? Which really made the Republicans mad because they didn't get their cut of the filing fee. It made the Democrats mad. They didn't get a cut of the filing fee, and nobody else did it. And it kind of put both parties on edge that we need to change the system in Florida. And so when I was in the legislature, I tried to get rid of the write-in deal. I lost. I didn't get it done. But it's a bad thing, the way that they interpreted it. It's a horrible thing because it does restrict you all from voting for the candidate of your choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might think, how often could that happen? But a report from Florida Open Primaries found that between 2000 and 2022, 114 Florida primary races were closed by write-in candidates. Over 8 million registered voters who would otherwise be allowed to vote were blocked. This is a bipartisan issue. You know, both parties use it to block voters, and both parties' voters are blocked. So it's very evenly distributed in that regard. Anybody from District 1 County Commission? So we have an example of that here in Sarasota. In 2024, in District 1 for County Commission, the primary had 2 Republican candidates running and no Democrat running in the general election. So this would determine the winner of the seat and should be a universal open primary. Every qualified voter would be able to vote. But at the last minute, well, right after the qualifying period ended, within a couple of days, the daughter of one candidate's campaign manager filed as a write-in candidate, closing the election to independents and to Democrats to vote in that. So that one move blocked 31,000 voters from voting. The winner won by 1,200 votes. So could it have been different if everybody had voted, do you think? Yeah, I think it could have. I'm not saying it would have, but it could have been. Under the write-in candidate loophole, this is legal. However, is it right? Because the intention of the original amendment was clear: let all voters vote. There would be a simple legislative fix if they could pass some legislation to correct this flaw in the system. However, legislators from both sides of the aisle do not support fixing this issue. So this is something that would be completely solved by open primaries. I mentioned 3 states that have open all candidate. Oh, wait, I wanted to go back. I wanted to ask you if you, when you were on supervisor, if you did have experience with people using the write-in loophole like we did in District 1.
Oh, yeah. Just about every political race you see anymore, you will see a write-in because the Democrats don't want anybody messing with their races. The Republicans don't want anybody messing with their races. So both sides do it. Practically every race that does not have a write-in candidate will get one just to close out the primaries. That's really a shame because that's not the way it was meant to be.
And is it only a legislative fix? That's the only option for this?
That is only the option right now, unless the Supreme Court of the state of Florida would rule, which they should, if they would rule over. But as we all know, sometimes Supreme Courts, even the United States Supreme Court, leans a little bit more way than the other. And so there's too much party politics involved there too.
Okay. Okay, so I mentioned 3 states that have open all candidate primaries: Alaska, California, and Washington. All candidates, regardless of party, appear on one ballot. All voters are eligible to vote. Then the top finishers, regardless of party, advance to the general election. In California and Washington, it's the top 2 finishers. And you may remember in 2020, there was a citizen initiative that put a proposed amendment on the Florida ballot for open primaries with top 2. 57% of Florida voters supported that, but of course it requires a 60% supermajority when it's a citizen initiative. The 3rd state, Alaska, is an outlier. The top 4 advance to the general elections, where voters use ranked choice voting to rank their preferences and determine the winner. Many people consider this the gold standard for elections, and it's used also in many local jurisdictions as well. And we'll come back to what's working in Alaska, but I wanted to ask quickly, is everybody familiar with ranked choice voting? I hope you've heard my speech on ranked choice voting. It's where you rank your preferences and you don't have to pick one candidate, you rank your preferences. David?
It should be clear that there's many ranked choice voting systems.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep.
It's not one system. Many different systems that fall under the general category.
Right, right. That are in use already certainly around the world, and also in over probably 60 jurisdictions in the United States. The biggest impact of closed primaries is known as the primary problem. We've come to understand that partisan primaries inhibit competition within parties and between parties, and yet they're increasingly consequential in determining election outcomes. 80% of US Senate races and 90% of House races are determined in the primary. The lack of competition is intensified by gerrymandering, which we're seeing quite a bit of right now, and also by the geographic self-sorting of voters. By that I mean red voters are moving to red states, blue voters are moving to blue states. So it's just continuing to exacerbate the situation. The dominant party's primary is the only race that matters in determining who the elected official will be, and only the voters who participate in those primaries are having a say in the outcome about who our representatives are. For the upcoming 2026 midterms, 91% of congressional districts are considered safe, meaning the dominant party's primary will determine the winner of that seat. In 2024, 87% of US House races were decided in partisan primaries by 7% of voters. I'm going to blow your mind even more here in a second. So this is a very small, usually highly opinionated group of voters who are determining these outcomes, and they really exert disproportionate influence to their numbers. And Mike, would you say that most districts are safe in Florida, right?
Very safe,
Yeah, yeah,
very safe.
yes. Florida is not one of the toss-up states, as we all know. So to follow these kinds of issues, I use a website called Unite America, and they have a page called Live Tracker that actually tracks actual results of primaries. And I'd been following it, and there were primaries this week. So far, as of yesterday, 9 states have held their primaries, and 23% of Congress has been elected by 1.8% of Americans. So it's startling, isn't it? So what is the impact when independent voters are shut out of elections? Well, first of all of our tax dollars go to pay for elections, and yet we don't get to participate. So what does that look like? Well, we love coming to Stony Brook from our Hot Topics lunches. It's a lovely setting. The staff is attentive. The buffet is always wonderful. And so we pay our money and we come to the luncheon. Well, I've been doing a little studying on election law in Florida, and I did not realize that Florida is a closed buffet state. So I'm sorry, but in the future, we'll all be paying for lunch. But when we come, only these 3 tables will actually get to eat lunch, okay? But you all don't mind that, right? You don't mind paying and they're gonna enjoy their lunch, no? It's only 2 years till the next election, so maybe we can do something about it then. So that's the way I'm thinking of it. If you feel uncomfortable with that regarding lunch, this is our electoral system, okay? We're all paying, and these people are eating our lunch, right? So I think I hear people often say, oh, well, we have closed primaries. I don't think they're thinking that through when they are so nonchalant about it or think there's nothing that can be done. So representation is also distorted. And the other big factor is that the elected officials are afraid to collaborate, afraid to problem solve, because they owe everything to this particular segment of voters. They have to keep them happy. So what happens if they don't keep everybody happy? Well, we've just seen an example, right? Because in Indiana, the legislators were told to gerrymander. They refused, and now they have been primaried by their own party. They've been booted out. Some of them had been there for years and even higher up in the hierarchy, and they've been booted because they didn't follow orders. So that's where that fear factor comes in. Under open primaries, it's not about the parties. The candidates who advance are the ones who have the most support. So it encourages candidates to form broad coalitions from the outset. They want to appeal to more voters instead of fewer. And the other thing that happens is the threat of being primaried by ideological hardliners vanishes as well, even in deep blue and deep red states. When independent voters participate, elections better reflect the full community, and elected officials are more likely to represent more constituents. So let's look at Alaska and what they can be a role model for us. In 2022, Alaska voters approved a citizen-led initiative that better aligned political incentives for leaders with what the public was hoping for. The reform established an open all-candidate primary with the top 4 candidates advancing to the general election, which would be determined by ranked choice voting. Under the old system, voters were forced to choose either a Republican or a Democratic ballot, and that was particularly chafing because Alaska has the highest percentage of independent voters of any state. 58% were independent, not getting a good choice when they went to the ballot, when they went to the polls. The new system made the general election more competitive, and it better reflects the independent majority nature of Alaska, electing a mix of conservatives, moderates, and 6 independent candidates who now make up 10% of the legislature. It really broke the gridlock, and they were able to form an effective coalition government. Let's see, I think it was 17 of the 20 people in the Senate formed a bipartisan coalition, and they worked together on issues that are important to them: a balanced budget, the economy, jobs, school, education, and public safety. The other thing that happened was their participation went way up. It was 36%. I don't know if you're familiar with what it typically is in primaries. It's usually, in closed primary states, it's usually 21%. In open primaries, it's 27%. They went to 36% in a midterm. Their last participation in a presidential election was 26%. So it went way up, and that's really the opposite of what usually happens. But extreme candidates from both parties were defeated, and it's really working out very well for them. Alaska's top 4 is considered the gold standard by many people, but then a lot of places use top 2 runoffs, and that's what we'll talk about for California and Washington, but many local jurisdictions use that, and you'll see that in many ballots. It's a proven alternative. All the candidates are put on the same ballot. Then the top 2, regardless of party, go to the general election. But there's an incentive for them to appeal to a broader base than just their narrow, most partisan voters, right? The result is higher voter participation, more competitive general elections, and less polarized legislatures. In 2020, Washington State had the highest primary turnout in the country at 43%, while California ranked 3rd highest at 33%. So somebody's liking it. No system is perfect, but evidence would indicate that top 2 is still a preferred alternative to regular partisan primaries. And I don't know if you probably don't follow this like I do, but there is a movement right now in California to do away with top 2. But when it's pretty controversial because it looks like there's going to be 2 Republicans running for governor. But when I looked at, okay, what is driving this? It's the most partisan people who don't like, they want to control it. They don't want the voters determining who's going to be in the top slots. And then the other group that's involved in that is third-party voters. So like the Green Party, they don't like it because they're probably not going to get up there either. So what do opponents to open primaries have to say? Does anybody think parties should get to pick their own candidates? Yeah, right? That's fair. Absolutely. They should have the right to choose their own candidates. But does that mean they can use public tax dollars to run primary elections that exclude half the voters? Not so much, right? Okay. Advocates argue that publicly funded elections deserve public access. Parties can still select and endorse their own primary candidates through a private process. They can have a private election, they can caucus, whatever they want to do to come up with their own candidate to put on the ballot. Opponents say it reduces voter choice because 2 candidates from the same party may advance to the general election. That is true. That can happen, especially in a place like Florida. But look what just happened in California, which is a heavily Democratic state. 2 Republicans are advancing. So it kind of blows up the gridlock or the paralysis that it's not over yet. But I'm just saying, you can't pigeonhole how it's going to turn out, right? Yeah. So, David.
The California situation is as it is, in spite of there being a Democrat majority, there's more Democrat candidates and only 2 Republican candidates in the primary. So the Democrats are splitting the vote, and that's why it's likely that 2 Republicans, even though they're not the most popular candidates, are going to be in the general.
Well, that's exactly what happens. Are we okay, honey? Okay. That's exactly what's happened in our system is that moderates split the vote and the extremes win, right? In fact, in my ranked choice presentation, I had a chart of a candidate who had won with 25% of the vote, and that's not uncommon, 25-30% of the vote in the primary, and they end up winning the election, right? As I was giving the presentation, I looked up, and I hadn't really analyzed it in over a year, and I looked up and I realized, oh, he's going to be our next governor probably. The guy who originally won his seat with 25%. So anyhow, yeah, that's the problem is things get split. That's why ranked choice voting or some kind of approval where, okay, I know you're a fan of approval voting, top four, you would typically, in a dominant state like ours, where the Republicans are so dominant, you would probably have 2 Republican candidates, 1 Democratic candidate, and then you might have a third party or another Democratic candidate. That's why you can't, okay, now I'm getting on my soapbox. To me, top 2 is still highly risky. You really need top 4 to get the flavor of the whole thing, right? Okay, would open primaries weaken party influence? I would think it would. But it actually might help parties in that they have to appeal to more voters, more organizations, more donors. They have to become broader, and if they can learn to be more encompassing, it might actually strengthen their position in the end. What changes is who the candidates are accountable to. Voters are more closely aligned, they end up more closely aligned with the moderate or the majority of voters rather than this extreme subset that ends up electing them in the first place. And it creates incentives for candidates to build broad, diverse coalitions. Mike, what is your response to these objections and what other objections do you see?
Well, I think the biggest thing is when you look at, and you got to look at it all along. I mean, our voting system has changed multiple times since 1776. In fact is, when 1776 came about, in this room, there would only be 4 of us that voted, okay? Because if you weren't white and if you didn't a property owner, you were not voting, okay? And it only took about another 100 years for the women to get involved with this deal. And so it changes all the time, so it is kind of fluid. But right now, the biggest problem we have are the independents, because you all are independent. You're not organized to change the system. But I happen to agree with Violet. It's no question, if the Democrats want to have a primary, let them pay for it. If the Republicans want to have a primary, let them pay for it, okay? And pick their candidate and put them on a sheet. People don't realize how horrible our system is when you've got 2 major parties controlling everything. People talk about, for example, Donald Trump, when you talked about the percentage earlier, you got to remember Donald Trump became president because of 34% of the vote, okay? Not 50%, not 50% plus 1, okay? There were 4 or 5 candidates in the Republican primary at that time, and so consequently 34% was enough to get the majority, and that's how it worked. We've got to change the system, and you all can change it, okay? It takes a lot, but you've got to get one of the major parties, and I think it'll be the Democrat Party that will change the system that we have in Florida if they will speak out. And there's a lot of movement within the Democrat Party to change it. There's some groups in there that don't want it changed because they've got power in a certain area. And power and the ability to get reelected makes a lot of politicians crooked.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to step off this for a minute because I want to stick with this train. I would like to talk about what can be done. I'll go ahead and say, I'm going to go past what the league's position is. Yes, we want open primaries. Okay, I'm going to go past that. But what would it take? So 2 weeks ago when I was finishing this up, I was prepared to say, a citizen initiative to drive a constitutional amendment, very, very difficult because it takes over 1 million signatures, but we've done it before, we can do it again. Well, I kept thinking, HB 1205 was signed a year ago right now, and that put all these incredible restrictions on citizen initiatives that just unbelievable, and plus extreme penalties if you made one error or anything. So it was intended to shut down the citizen initiative process, which is a shame because there's been some great legislation that's come out of that. But unfortunately, the league sued for HB 1205, which we sue pretty much for all the voting legislation that comes out. But 2 weeks ago, the court ruled that HB 1205 will stand. So we lost that lawsuit. So for now, citizen initiatives are off the table in Florida for the foreseeable future, which is really unfortunate. The second one is if the legislature decided to, if a unicorn ran through the chamber and if the legislature decided to pass legislation to adjust that. However, the parties do have right of association that they can choose who they are working with, and so that really would not stand. So then, as Mike just mentioned, the third option would be to have a party open their primaries to non-members to vote. We encourage both parties to do that. But as Mike mentioned, there's probably one that in Florida that's more inclined than the other. There was conversation going on, but we feel like since some Democrats have won some elections, not just a couple in Florida, but around the country, there seems to be less interest now because they seem to think that there's going to be a shift. I'm not sure why they think that in Florida, but anyhow, David.
Yeah, this is something I hadn't considered before, but do parties have the choice to make their primary open?
Yes, they do.
They do.
Okay.
Why
They do.
don't they?
Well-
Why don't they? It would be so much to their advantage. They would learn what candidate in their primary has the best choice to win the general.
And
There's a problem, okay?
go ahead.
And I've got some
Huh?
inside track, if you will, to leaders in both political parties. Most of them can't quite figure out what the hell I am, okay? So it works out real good. But a lot of the leadership of the Democrat Party wants to do just that, declare it open, okay? There are some of the elected Democrats who happen to have power. They don't want to change anything because they've got their seat, okay? And since I've got my seat, what the hell do I care about anybody else? And so it's a real problem. I'm probably going to be speaking to the Democrat Party's executive committee on the subject. I know it's rare that they invite a, quote, Republican to come and speak, but, it's kind of interesting. I've been lucky enough over the years to establish a reputation of being very, very moderate, and it works out good. My highest claim of that was they wanted me to be Senate president when I was in. Well, my wife was having some health issues. We decided we didn't want to do that. I also did not want to spend 2 years traveling the state trying to raise money for some idiots that I didn't want to have with me, okay? And so we kind of walked away from it. But what was so interesting, when the president of the Senate did get sworn in, Senator Garrett Richter, Republican from Naples, jumped up and nominated me for vice president. Where the shock came is Chris Smith, who was the head of the Democrat Party at that time in the Florida Senate, jumped up to second the nomination. You could have heard a mouse pee on cotton. Everybody like, what? And then he spent 10 minutes talking about my wife. And he said, if he's good enough for D-Ben and he's good enough for me, he's the fairest guy I've ever met. And I was quite proud of that. And because working together to get things done, we can do it. The Democrats can do it. And they have more reason to do it than the Republicans do, because the majority being where it is, again, but some of the Democrats who are currently elected don't want to take a chance on giving up that power. Now, with the change last time in the redistricting, they've got four key Democrats, including Washburn Schultz, who's a great friend of mine, by the way. Debbie and I served in the Senate together. She's a neat young lady, and she is at risk. And so some of the four key Democrats are at risk. There might be a push from them to open it up, because she would pick up a lot of Republican vote and independent voters, okay? So I'm hoping that we can get that pushed. And if she can get it done to have me go speak at their executive committee meeting, I will certainly do it and change my deal, because it's so important that we get it done in Florida. Until we can find a way to either get a true third-party system or have an open system, which I would prefer, I would like to see something done. But we've got a chance, but the Democrats are the ones who are going to have to lead it, because once one of them opens, the other one has no choice but to follow.
Breaks it
They
open.
have to follow, because the independents want an opportunity to vote.
I know you're all anxious to ask questions. Maybe we should stop just for a minute and thank our speakers and make sure Vila has completed her
I'm
presentation.
pretty close, and I think this is more interesting. So let's do this.
So we'll go
Yeah.
ahead to questions.
That's really a shame. I got to tell you, she did a hell of a job on this. And I reviewed it and critiqued it. And I hope you take the time to look at it. Is it going to be on your website?
It'll be on the, well, the recording will be on the website, so
Okay.
it's okay.
But
I'm
it
giving
really
it
does.
a
She did a
UU
great
church
job with it.
in a couple of
And
weeks.
it's unusual to see somebody take that much of an interest that's not personally involved in the deal. So you really have a great leadership team, and take charge of it.
Thank you. I do want, I'm not sure if you said it, if I missed it, that some of the Democratic local committees have voted to do that. It wasn't just the leadership that was talking about it. Some of the local teams have also voted for it, but apparently it's lost a little steam at this time. But let's go ahead and take questions for the group.
You know, let me just tell you about another problem with it, and it really is a problem. Right now, the African American community and the Democrats are fighting it. They don't want it, okay? But with the changes that came about, they may not have any choice but to recruit you all, the independents, to get on their side of the deal. If that happens, the Republicans will have to follow, and we will get an open primary in the state of Florida.
So my question is, if you were to be successful, what is the drop dead date in order to be able to open up the midterm primary?
It won't happen
won't
by
happen
then.
now.
It will not happen.
Yeah, David.
If both parties decided they wanted their primaries, I'm David Wallace. If both primaries were, if both parties decided to open their primaries, would it be separate Republican and Democrat primaries where you'd have a Republican winner and a Democrat winner?
It could be, unless they opened up all primaries to where you as an independent could vote for whichever you wanted on the ticket. But they would, then the Republicans would be forced to have their own primary, okay? The Democrats would have their own primary, but they would have to pay for it. How many independents are in this room, okay? The reason there's not more of you is because you want to vote.
You want to vote, yeah.
Okay? And so consequently, if you're registered Democrat, you really don't have much of a choice, because a lot of the Democrats that are on the tickets know they're going to lose anyhow, so they don't work too hard. And it's a problem.
So you're talking about they would have to pay for it. How much money is that? What does it cost?
When we ran an election in Manatee County, okay, I won't speak for Manatee County, for example, like even for a fire district, something like that, you're going to somewhere around $1 million, okay? Well, you got to remember how many people we have to hire and how many people have to do it. That's a small price to pay for the freedom of being able to select the candidate that you want. So it's expensive. But since we're already paying for the election anyhow, okay, and you don't get to vote, it's going to be the same amount of money, just outlawed two separate primaries.
Talk about approval voting, because most people don't know what it is, and if we had approval voting, we wouldn't need primaries.
It's called a jungle primary is what it's called, okay? And the problem that you've got truly, and it's to be realistic about it, if there were not primaries, okay, that anybody who wanted to run could go down and put that in and pay a filing fee, you'd have a voting list this long, okay? So you've got to find a way to narrow it down, because otherwise, does anybody have any idea? You might. How many political parties there are registered in the state of Florida?
Oh, probably.
I think there's 13 or 14, okay? Some of them you've never even heard of, okay? There is a, quote, independent party, okay? The problem, again, with independents, you're so damn independent, you don't work together to get the deal done, okay? But it should be done. But to me, the easiest way to do it is get that constitutional amendment done. I hate to say it, but it's not going to happen. Here's why. First of all, they've got to get well over 1 million, I think it's 1,600,000 applications right now, okay? They opened it up. We used to charge 25 cents to verify one, okay? Everyone would come in, be 25 cents. Now, I think it's Sarasota, I think it's like $3 per each, okay? And a lot of counties are higher than that, okay? Just to go through the paperwork of verifying it. So they've priced it out of the game, okay? Then they've put some horrible, horrible fines on people that John thought that he had the right person sign it, but he turns it in and that person's not a registered voter in the state of Florida, so they kick it out and decide he's going to fine him because he didn't disclose that when he was doing it, and now he's got to face a $50,000 fine, okay? So they've made it to where it's practically impossible. They can make these things happen because we as citizens are allowing it to happen, okay? And it's up to us to change the system. It really is. And I don't, other than grunt work and getting out there and pushing, a lot of you are registered Democrats. Push the Democrat Party. They have got the best chance of doing it. We've never had the opportunity the way it is right now, and especially when they put the 4 Democrat seats up, okay, that through the redistricting. And so you'll know, redistricting is extremely difficult. I was supposed to chair the committee my last 2 years in the Florida Senate. And I actually have it in writing that I was going to chair that. And the Republican Party went to the head of the Senate, who happened to be a Republican, and convinced him to withdraw his support of me to do it because they knew I would try to make it as fair as possible. And the Republican, my own Republican Party, didn't really want me to do it because I'm going to open it up. But it's really tough. It really is.
So Mike, you know, we as the league, we're trying to inform and educate voters about getting out the vote and talking to different audiences. Everybody struggles to try to talk to independents because, as you said, there's no
We're
leader,
independent.
there's no organization. Can you give us any suggestions on how to talk to independents?
I think the biggest thing is to talk to your friends, your neighbors, your opponents, and get them to understand how important it is that they talk. You know, it's just like going back to the petition thing, but this time you're just talking to people that they've got to convince the Democrat Party to open it up. The Republicans are not going to open it up, period. And I've been a Republican all my life and will continue to be a Republican. I'm a Ron Reagan, Rockefeller Republican, okay? And
Okay.
I know. And so it is. It's different. I always say, you know, most people who are alive today and working well and living well, they might vote liberal, but believe me, they live conservative. Okay, down at Plymouth Harbor where I live, It's quite expensive to live there, and people talk about it, and the preponderance of those are Democrat registered people. And I said, yeah, y'all could afford Plymouth Harbor because you lived as a conservative, okay? So it wasn't that you wanted to help people who were unemployed by giving them your money. You wanted them to have somebody else's money. And so it's a tough issue. But
Let's wait for the microphone just so everybody can hear.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that people raise their hand and we'll come to you with a microphone.
You're good.
I'm ready. Hi. I'm curious, is there a way to follow the money here? Like maybe make the parties pay for their primaries? How did we get stuck paying for them? Is it legislated? Can we tell our commission here that we don't want to pay for them anymore and make them take it out of the budget? Is there a way to do that?
it'd
commission,
be
though.
interesting. I mean, they're not going to change. The Florida legislature is certainly not going to introduce something that's going to make the
Voluntarily,
Republican Party pay for its own primary, and the Democrats aren't either. So until we can open up the entire system and get more moderates involved in the deal, it's not going to happen. I'd like to tell you different, but you know.
I'm full of questions.
And I'm listening. I'm not walking out on you. I'm getting my tea.
I don't think the Republican Party wanted Donald Trump to be their candidate. Do the parties have any authority to lock someone out of their primary?
Not really. Not really. I don't know of any.
The candidate chooses the party doesn't choose the candidate.
Pretty much.
Okay, next question from me would be, what do the people in this room who want to vote, and maybe they're going to be shut out in the primaries, although everybody can vote in school board, don't forget that, so don't miss the primaries. But what can the people in this room do? Can you think of-
Basically, if you want to vote in a primary here, if you really want to have a say in it, pick out the candidate of your best choice, and then pick out a secondary candidate from the other party. And if your person's not qualifying, they're not doing anything, and it's really interesting because how few people actually know anything about the candidates that are running. Okay, it really is. It's sad, but it's true. Okay, you got to remember, I was a Florida state senator. I was raised in Sarasota. A lot of people know my name, but you cannot believe the number of people who would ask my wife and I, do you guys go to Washington every week? Or, oh yeah, they really have no idea what the hell you do, okay? And it's really a shame because we're all affected by what we do, whether it's in Washington or the state. But other than coming to a luncheon, some of the people are going to leave this room, and that's going to be the end of this conversation. And it's really sad.
How does the league help with that?
Well, we're doing informing voters. As we talked for those who were at our annual meeting last month, we introduced our Get Out the Vote campaign. So we actually launched that this week. And we're also multiplying that message by working with organizations, other nonpartisan organizations that are like-minded who want to get out the vote. So we're incorporating that. We're offering them all that information, all those resources. We're going to have a landing page on our website where they can come and collect social media, email templates, flyers, and everything to get out the vote. Make your voice heard. That's one way. And then, of course, we also have our candidate forums where we're going to have candidate forums for county commission and school board. And you can see about that on our website. And then also we have vote411.org, which is our voter guide, our online voter guide that interviews. We send the information. It's all the candidates in their own words, but it's everything about where to vote, how to vote, when to vote. So that's really our best resource is Vote 411, and we're sharing that with everybody. If you're part of another organization that can use those assets, for example, next week I'm speaking at the Social Justice Alliance of the Gulf Coast. There's 27 organizations that I'm introducing these assets to send to their membership. And another fun thing that we're doing right now is, these social media blasts. We had these tiles with a person, and it says, are you registered to vote, or make your voice heard, that type of thing. Well, it was all stock photos, and we said, why don't we use local, real people? And so we have John Thaxton, we have Renee James Gilmore, we have Trevor Harvey from NAACP. I've asked, I don't know if I'll get Dr. Crosby from Moat Marine. We have Nate Jacobs from West Coast Black Theater. So if you have a community, I should get a famous senator to do that.
And I would do it in a heartbeat. I'll tell you another
Okay.
good one is Tom Edwards. Tom Edwards is a great guy on the school board.
Very partisan.
Follow Tom.
Yeah.
He's got some candidates down there that he's backing on the deal. I'll never forget when Tom was running the last time. You can imagine the surprise. They were having a fundraiser for him downtown, and my wife and I walked in, and you could, again, heard that mouse, like, what the hell are they doing here? Well, I happen to believe in Tom Edwards, and I like the story that he tells.
Just a reminder, we're nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose political candidates or party. That's my PSA.
No, but I can. Okay.
You can. All right, what else do we have? Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Amy Ahern. One of the, and I don't know how other people judge this, no pun intended, but so when you get to the ballot, I don't know how I should do the research on the judges. I don't know I don't even know what to do with them.
And I'll tell you honestly, I don't either. Okay?
That's not helpful.
Some of them I know personally, okay, that I've met, but I don't have a way, and I don't know of a good way, unless you're really into the political side of the politics of the legal system. There's just not a good way other than the garbage you get in the email or in the mailbox. And they have a thing about the mailers. The mailer is only good until I can get from here to that garbage can over there. Okay, it's a problem. So I do not know a good way to research it.
So I will tell you in Vote 411, there will be the judges, but also I have asked one of our editorial team, isn't there a way, we link to, I believe, the Bar Association or something, because the Bar Association ranks judges. But I've asked, I think the way I always do it is I look at what was their decision, not that they're there to interpret the law,
Right.
but if I think with my vast legal background, if I decided they were incorrect in their interpretation, that's one way I do it. It's a lot of research, though, isn't it?
If the
It's
Bar
terrible.
Association does something, I
They-
didn't know
yeah,
that, so
yeah.
I
You can look on the
that's
Bar
helpful.
Association.
And I
Katie,
think that's what I looked at. I looked at how many of their rulings were overturned. And if they had a lot of rulings overturned, I was like, yeah, they're probably not very good.
yeah,
Uh,
Okay.
I can speak about the American Bar Association.
sure.
Because since I'm married to an attorney, he gave me that list every time, and what's important on it is who they don't support. Because there's very few, and if they say do not vote for this, there's a really good reason not to. And that's really probably the most important, because generally they're gonna get reelected unless.
Yeah, it's not an election, it's retain. You vote to retain.
Right,
Right,
so it's more to vote against even than.
okay. David, I think you have several more.
I have a very lame system in answer to Amy's question. I look at who the governor was that appointed the judge, and if I like that, if the governor who appointed the judge is someone I like better than the current governor, I vote to retain. Otherwise, I vote to kick him out.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, John.
So I want to go back to the loophole. And the comparison of, is it easier in terms of the loophole versus the open primary? I was a legislator in Massachusetts. I ran as a write-in. I did not have to pre-register. I did not have to submit anything. I had to publicize the hell
Right.
that I was running, and I knocked 2 people off the ballot. And so the loophole really wouldn't exist in that state the way it does here.
I don't know of any other states that have the write-in provision. I never followed it. The only time I got involved with it was to prove that it was bad, okay? And I was lucky enough, didn't care whether I won or not. It's just wrong because when it happens, if they didn't have that, then all of the independents could vote in anyone that they wanted. Would they be allowed to vote in a Republican primary? I don't know, but it would go to this list.
And see, part of it was our state, that if you were an independent, you could choose your ballot.
Choose your ballot. Like Iowa, when we lived in Iowa, you went down on election day and said, okay, I want the Democrat ballot, I want the Republican ballot, whatever you wanted. When we lived in Arizona for a short period of time, actually in California, they had a little bit more freedom even back then. Because I remember coming back from Vietnam, and there was so many people who obviously were against the Vietnam War and the whole thing. And I didn't like how people greeted me. Okay? And so if I thought that they were Republican or Democrat, I was going to vote against them. Just because of how they treated the Vietnam veterans.
Any other questions? Well, you see why I wanted color commentary. This is so fascinating to listen to, Mike. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate that.
David?
Ask a question.
Thank you.
A couple of other things quickly. First of all, I did want to, I don't know if you're a thermal kind of a guy, Mike, but I did want to say thank you for being here. I'm going to hand that to you.
Why don't you give one to somebody who needs one?
Oh, I'm going to give
You know how many of these are
though.
collectible here?
Okay. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. First of all, excuse me. Today, as Marie mentioned, it is the last topic lunch for this season. And we're going to be focused on the elections and pick up again. I'm not sure if we'll pick up in November or December, but be sure to watch the website and our newsletter to keep posted on that. But I wanted to thank the Hot Topics team. Carol Hart is our leader, and Roz Painter-Goffey, Mary Pat, Marie Keeney, and who am I missing? Ann Hardy, who could not be here today, but we really thank you for the brilliant work that you did this year. The other thing we wanted to share is we did a big push at the annual meeting last month about people who want to work in voter registration. Because of all the restrictions, we don't actually register voters any longer. However, we do help people with their registrations to check. You know, you'd have to check for your mail-in ballot, all these different things to be sure that your registration is up to date. We're doing a huge push. I think we have 6 events this month or next month already planned, and I keep giving them more events that I want them to participate in. So we really always want new people to join our voter registration team. And when you go to some of these tables, sometimes it's a little bit slower, but sometimes you're absolutely mobbed with people who are nervous about their registration and will they be able to vote. So you know that you're really doing a service in the community when you join this group.